So, a quick intro to Agony. Those who have joined us for the past sessions have already known, but for the first timers, you may be wondering, why Agony Expert Series? We have drawn inspiration from an agony aunt, who by definition is a person who writes a column in a newspaper or magazine, in which they reply to readers who have written to them for advice on their personal problems. In short, it's kind of a play on that concept. Thus, the agony expert that we have now, where you, our participants, can share what problems and struggles you are facing within your organization and seek insights directly from our expert. So, this is the 14th out of our 17 sessions. As you can see on the screen, together with a total of 17 world-class experts that we have gathered, they will be covering 8 different topics that are timely and relevant in our industry today. Well, the good news is you can cherry pick what session you'd like to attend. So today's session is on strategy efficacy. Wondering if your strategy is still relevant today? We have Tracy Rose, Senior Associate Consultant of SCQuARE, a management consulting firm that provides strategic, creative, and storytelling techniques to build the right plans. She will speak about strategy efficacy. Our experts will share how to easily recalibrate your strategic goals to deliver results and more. All right, just a little bit of background of who we are. People is a consulting firm that started in 2004, sold itself and relaunched into 2020 with a consulting model geared towards the future of work. Our team serves both our clients and our network of over 1,000 experts. Who are these experts? We have consultants, business leaders, thought leaders, researchers, and tech partners. Together, we deliver consulting work, speaking engagements, lunch and learns, training, coaching, instructional design, organizational and people diagnostics. Our experts deliver work across 6 broad domains, which are people, digital innovation, business, sustainability, change management, and design. In short, people can attend to any business challenge you might have. Do check out our website and find out more about us at www.people.com. And just a quick run through of what's going to happen today. We have Tracy to address the group for approximately 25 minutes, including a breakout session, followed by Q&A with you for another 25 minutes. Then we will go and wrap things up for you in the last remaining 5 minutes of the event for us to get feedback of what you think of today's session. Again, we'd love to receive your questions. Drop them in the chat box and we'll address them during the Q&A session. I know you're all excited and I won't keep you any longer. So handling it over to you, Tracy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Do I need to share the screen again?
Yes.
Okay. Is it on screen? Am I on screen?
You can see the presentation.
Okay, I'm good to go. Okay. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from a potentially sunny UK here. I'm delighted to be with you today. The agenda is, as Agatha said, but it could be a bit longer and interactive depending on your participation. So I'm very happy for you to ask questions. I will ask you questions and I'd love to get your feedback so that we can make sure that I'm addressing what's relevant to you and what resonates with you. So a little bit about SCQuARE. SCQuARE's been around for 27, 28 years now, and we work globally, and we've worked in over 80 countries. I myself have worked in 30 countries, so I know that SCQuARE works across different cultural and geographical boundaries, but also works across multiple industries, as you can see by some of our clients on our client list here. Why do our clients call us in? I don't know if this scene is familiar to you. A lot of our clients they spend a lot of their times in meetings, and they know those meetings could be more productive, more effective, better decisions, faster decisions made. and presentations less painful. And in the last 18 months, those meetings might look a bit more like this. And there's been even more emphasis on how can you get the most out of your time together, the expertise in the room together, and make better decisions for the business. So we know lots of our clients, and you've seen from our client list, we work with fantastic companies with very talented people, but even so, they find themselves frustrated by great visions, great thinking, but bringing that thinking together, being able to create plans, to realise the ideas, use that expertise and knowledge, doesn't always work as effectively as it could. Also, we know a lot of people that are so close to their business, have lots of ideas, or they have an innovation agenda, an NPD agenda, lots of ideas or solutions they can develop, and then they try and reverse engineer those solutions by making the data fit what they think the solution is, and then wonder why 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the line, something hasn't gone quite right because they've approached it in a back to front kind of way. And then diaries, more so now than ever, just seem to be filled up with meeting time and less time for doing. So that meeting time, the thinking time, is even more important to be productive, to be rigorous, to be robust in its intellectual, critical thinking than ever before. And then it's frightening how much time our clients seem to spend preparing for meetings. And they will spend a huge amount of time creating presentations. And as we've got here, the visual pyrotechnics of an opening Olympic ceremony. But as soon as anybody asks a really tough question that's going to be critical to making a decision, the thinking can fall apart because not all of the logic is there, not all of the thinking has been done. Or the thinking's fantastic, but the packaging of that thinking lets the presenter down because it's just not coherent, or it's not easy for people that are less close to the subject matter to assimilate, understand, and make a decision off the back of that presentation. I don't know if any of these resonate with you. Any of you can relate to these frustrations, but it's something we've been hearing a lot over the past 20 years, but it never goes away. And I think those problems have been accelerated in the last 18 months because COVID has forced us to accelerate our digital transformation. The way we work is different. We've got to be more effective. We've got to be doing it over technology, not have that face-to-face interaction. And it's really created a shift and a focus on what are the skills that are needed coming out of the pandemic. And those countries, those companies that really understand where they need to invest in skills development are the people that are going to see a real advantage coming out the other side. We've seen some research. This is research done in the UK last autumn, and it's projecting that a huge investment is going to be required over the next coming years in order to get people really up to speed with the skills. Basic digital skills need investment. There's a huge gap and a huge requirement for people to be investing in STEM knowledge, so that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then on top of that, there's the ongoing need to invest in leadership and management skills and interpersonal and communication skills now more than ever. And when it comes to strategy, critical thinking and dealing with data, we've never been so rich in data as we are in this day and age, and people are often drowning in data but struggling to drive out insights and meaningful interpretation of that data and communication of it. And just bringing that back to strategic thinking, I found something from a Harvard review that was talking about where people fall down in developing their strategies, and it's often because people are either very tactical or they're very blinkered in their thinking, and their strategies don't hold water. They end up with a list of priorities and choices, but that's not necessarily a cohesive strategy that they've developed. So how does SCQuARE help with that? Well, SCQuARE, and you may think, why is it spelled in such a strange way? SCQuARE is a mnemonic, and it's a mnemonic that represents an end-to-end thinking and presentation framework. And that framework helps people think through and solve problems. So it's a really strong problem-solving mechanic, and it's something that people can use individually, or it's a fantastic collaboration tool for people to use in teams, a common language, a common way of approaching things to make them more efficient to get from A to Z. And that helps obviously with critical thinking skills. It's also a structure that allows you to have a framework to manage data and to unpick what at first sight might be something quite complicated and simplify it so that you get the cut through and the understanding. We call it the so what, that really drives out insight rather than just being a deck of data. So that's obviously helping with that need for information processing skills. And it's this so what philosophy that really turns insights into actions, because it isolates the problems you need to fix. It highlights the opportunities that require an action plan, and it really helps you see the wood for the trees in terms of unpicking complex data. But that's only half the story. The other half is about how do you present your understanding, your knowledge, your recommendations, your proposals to many stakeholders, and do it in a way that's easy to understand and easy and for people to make a confident, positive decision. So this is all advanced communication. And if you have these different skills together, then it improves the quality of leadership and management. If you've got to create a vision, you've got to sell a vision, you've got to set direction for people that they can then work within and support, then it's key leadership and management skills. We've obviously got a very short amount of time. Normally people would come on a SCQuARE course, and it's a 2 or 3, sometimes 3.5 day training program and workshop with live work. So we're trying to condense, or I'm trying to condense 2 days into half an hour. So what I will endeavour to share with you over the next half an hour is a flavour of how we go about structuring our analysis to unlock these insights. A tool that we use called causal chains that really give you a rich way of mining information, and not just handling data, but really understanding the cause and effect, the implications, the consequences of a problem, so that you know what it is that needs fixing, you isolate that problem. And also it's a huge 90% of that understanding that problem is how you develop the right solution for that problem. We have something called the pivotal question, which is kind of a new spin on, not a new spin, but it's an alternative way of creating an elevator pitch, but you're selling the problem rather than selling the solution. Because if people don't buy the problem, they won't buy the solution. You've got to create the pain, create that call to action, and the pivotal question does that in a really comprehensive way on one page. And then the methodology, the end-to-end framework of SCQuARE, the mnemonic, is also the sequence that enables you to build a story and represent your thinking in that visual way, in a comprehensive story. We can do all of this on a piece of paper, but in this digital age, we've also got software that does a lot of the work for you. You just have to input the content, and SCQuARE will take you step by step through the process, give you the templates, transpose information, and whilst you're concentrating on quality, robust thinking and getting the right data, it's creating the presentation in the background, and it can create it in Word, PDF, or PowerPoint. All of those three means are ways that you can output your thinking through SCQuARE. We'll have the opportunity today to do a bit of breakout work so that you can see SCQuARE and how it comes to life, but also very much to get your input on any thoughts, any questions, where this resonates with you, questions you want to ask of the methodology, or share any examples. So just to check in, is there anybody, we only heard from a couple of people in the chat box before, is anybody wanting to say who they are, where they're from, why they're here, what are the particular interests that you have in this topic, and how can I help you most. Anybody got anything they'd like to add at this stage? Still thinking about it. Okay, but if you put anything in the chat box as we go through, then Agatha and Melvin will point that out to me. Okay, so just going back, the reason why SCQuARE was developed is to help people that have got all the information, have the subject matter expertise, but sometimes struggle to put that thinking together, to see the wood for the trees, be able to stand back and be more strategic, and then present that thinking in order to get stakeholders to make decisions, be that a customer or be that internal stakeholders. What we find a lot of companies try and do when they try and create one way of creating a plan, one way of doing business planning or strategy, is there's a tendency sometimes to overcompensate and create templates, whether they're Excel templates to put all the market data in, the financial data and the P&L, or PowerPoint templates to put a strategy across in a way that is consistent across different areas of the business, different departments. And that's fantastic for creating consistency, for guiding people, for creating some control about the outputs, but they are just outputs. You can't control the quality of the thinking of the content that goes into those templates. And that's, again, where we often get called in, where companies have a methodology, it's fantastic, it looks great, but they know that the thinking behind the templates isn't robust enough. So they ask us to come in and help put some depth and quality of thinking behind what goes into these, filling these charts and filling the boxes in. So structured thinking is a way of making sure you've got the rigor and an efficiency, and bring that together to create a solid plan, a solid strategy, solid thinking, and then present that thinking in a clear way. We've got a one-page diagnostic that was adapted from an academic piece of work from somebody called Noster, and we find this helps people really pinpoint where they're struggling. So very often people get straight into the data, they're comfortable, they have people that are in the data, using the data, and they pull that all together, they can articulate the problem, create a solution, an action plan, and put that together and package it away. But if that thinking is not anchored around an aligned aim that all stakeholders are brought into, they will sometimes find that people just aren't buying into it. A great example of this in the UK is Brexit. There was lots of information, contradictory information, conflict and argumentation, but nobody actually bought into what a successful Brexit could be, should be, and that's where we fell over for 2 years, because nobody was bought into one definition of what success would be. Major fault in the plan. Sometimes an aim, but people just go, oh, they're not interested in the data, they're bored with the data, they know what the problem is, they know what the solution is, let's get on with it. But then they find themselves having to make decisions based on assumptions, and in an ever increasingly risk averse business world, people won't make decisions if they haven't got the evidence to support those recommendations. So then the opposite is also frustrating and problematic, where people are drowning in data. You always hear the death by PowerPoint, the deck of death, wheelbarrows of data, the show and tell, pray and spray, all these different ways people are describing the frustration of sitting through painful meetings with data points left, right and centre, and cut any which way, but it isn't synthesized to allow a common understanding of the problem that needs to be fixed. And if you don't have that agreement to the problem, but you put a recommendation on the table, you run the risk of there being resistance, or people can't make a decision because they're not quite sure what the data's been telling them, and where that solution fits in, because it's not been connected to any of the data points directly. And then we have great analysis. We know what the problem is, but the solution is very average. We do what we've always done. We're just going to do more of the same. And then you run the risk of you haven't solved the problem. You're just doing the same old. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So sometimes if you don't ensure that the solution is a solution to the right problem, that you end up with a solution that is not sufficient to deliver your ambitions. Then we have in the old Myers-Briggs definition, the lack of completed finishers, that people that get excited by the idea, they know what the problem is, they know what the solution is, but the boring bit is the executional detail. They just want to sell it, get the reaction, get the decision, but they don't have a fully resourced action plan. And that's when people suddenly find themselves 6 months, 12 months down the line going, why didn't that plan work? It should have worked. It fell down because the execution wasn't thought through in enough details. It hadn't really bottomed out what executional excellence looks like. And that leads to people being frustrated. It leads to people criticizing the plan when actually the solution wasn't wrong. It was just the execution that was the weak point in the chain. And then great thinking, great plan. It's got all the elements of the jigsaw together. However, the presentation of it has let itself down and people aren't able to make a decision because the story doesn't hang. It's not persuasive. As I tell my husband all the time, it's not enough to be right. It's not enough to be logical. You have to be persuasive. So the sales story is very often the deal breaker, how you communicate that thinking, how you get that information across in a way that people go, my God, that's the obvious solution. Let's do it. How can we support you? Here's the investment. Here's the resource. Here's the green light. So great thinking, great ideas can still be rejected if that thinking isn't packaged in a way that is compelling and is comprehensive. And it's no coincidence that all of these steps, all of these pieces of jigsaw represent the steps in the SCQuARE framework, because we're all about getting every piece of the jigsaw right to set our clients up for success. So SCQuARE is all about having a very clear aim. You know where you're going, you know what success looks like, we know what's working, we know what's holding us back, we know what the barriers to success are, and we can address that with the right solution, a targeted solution, and we can work out how we're going to execute it, why we're going to execute it in that way, and we package it in a way that is easy to understand and easy for people to make confident decisions. So SCQuARE is this mnemonic. So the S is for the start point and settings, C is the complication and change, Q is the question, and this we call it the pivotal question because your presentation pivots on people really buying into the problem and understanding that is what we have to fix. That creates the call to action, and that call to action is the pivot point that tips people over into going, absolutely, I buy that answer, which is the A, and then you go into detail on how that answer gets played out. What is a specific recommendation, strategy by strategy, tactic by tactic, with the supporting evidence. So SCQuARE is an end-to-end framework for creating strong plans with robust thinking. So the S and C is all about the analysis. It's how we structure and organize our data so that we're very clear on how we can then synthesize that data. We interpret it because we've got greater clarity. We then go on to enable people to be more creative about the solutions because we've identified and isolated the problem, so we know what it is we need to fix. It's not just a solution for the sake of solution or starting with a solution, which we often find people fall into that trap of, I've got an idea, how do I justify it? And then once you've got that solution, you've then got to make sure you know how to execute it, implement the plan. And all of this needs to be packaged together in a way that is easy for the audience to understand, feels like a no-brainer idea. So it's not about big surprises, it's about something that is logical, and they're confident of the quality of the thinking. So there are two skills that we train when we teach SCQuARE. One is the ability to think strategically and to communicate that thinking in a way that's clear. It's no good just having one of those skills. It's no good having the thinking power of Einstein if you stand up and present it and people are saying, oh my God, make us stop. I don't get this, don't understand it, don't know where it's going, and I'm finding it hard to follow. Equally, it's no good being fantastic on your feet, a really great communicator, if your head resembles a jumbled up bowl of spaghetti and the thinking isn't clear in the first place. So you need both of those skills. But how do you think? I don't know if we've got any psychologists in the room that have studied thinking. But if I were to ask you to think of a business challenge that you're facing, take note, what's going through your head? What's the language that you might be using? So if I give you 1 minute now to just think of something that's in your inbox that you're thinking about, how does your internal voice speak? I've got some suggestions for you here. So might you be thinking, when do I need to do this? Have I got the time to do this? How's this going to fit in with my other priorities? Who do I need to involve? What data have I got? Have we been in this situation before? Have we got prior learnings? How's it going to impact on our ability to achieve our goals? How do I feel emotionally? Am I feeling threatened? Am I feeling excited? Am I feeling stressed? So lots and lots of thoughts might be coming in when you're looking to think about a project, a piece of work, presentation that you might have to do. What do you notice about the language in these speech bubbles? Anybody notice anything? I've highlighted the words here. So when, who, what, how, they're all questions. So when we think, we're asking questions. And what SCQuARE does, it gives you a structure and sequence for asking those questions in a way that is very logical. It's a linear process, which when you're working and collaborating with other people within teams, but even more importantly, when you're working cross-functionally, it's a way of working together that allows everybody to bring their expertise to the table, but work through it systematically in a very logical structure and order. So we start off with the S. So this is asking us about, well, where are we starting from? What's our setting, our context? So we look at the scope of what's in, what's out of play. What are we trying to achieve? What's working? What have we got that we can build positive foundations upon, and that we can continue to use, repeat good behaviors, strategies that's been successful for us up to now. So we start with the positives. And then we need to understand, okay, what are the barriers to success? So what are things that are complicating our plan, or what are changes? So much of data, well, all data by its very nature is historical. So we can spend all our time looking at history, but actually this is a plan for the future. So we need to be able to put that future spin on everything. We need to be able to look around the corner and anticipate what are changes that are coming at us. So not just the data we're looking at here, but what do we know that's coming? It could be a change in legislation. It could be a change in what our competition are doing. It could be a change in our customer landscape, changes in technology, changes in political environments, and something that might impact massively on cost of goods or speed of execution. It could be technological change. We need to factor that in. And those changes could be good or they could be bad, but we need to call them out, and we need to look at them differently if they're bad changes or if they're positive changes. But all of these things require action, and this is where we isolate where our solution is going to come from. The big question is the pivotal question. So when we've looked at all this data, how do we synthesize everything and create a one-page summary that brings all that thinking together, that says, if we've got to take people that are less close to the subject, we've taken them through all the data, but how do we bring it all together on one page that says, this is it in a nutshell, this is what's keeping you awake at night, keeping us awake at night, this is what we need to fix. We then go on to ask the important question, well, what is the answer to that problem? But that will have come out very clearly from the work we do in those previous stages. And then the R&E is about, okay, what are we recommending that we do? How are we going to do each task and each element of the task? And why are we going to do it that way? So SCQuARE is all about asking questions, but asking questions in a very organized, structured, logical, linear flow. So our start point and setting is all about putting the parameters down for our plan, what's in, what's out of scope, what are we trying to achieve. This is where people can fall into the first traps when it comes to strategic thinking and strategic planning. Anybody, I don't expect any answers to come flooding in here, anybody want to share with us some of the traps that they feel that they've experienced, that they or their colleagues might struggle with? Okay, so here's some that I thought you might come up with. So struggling to get people, stakeholders aligned around the scope, particularly if you're working cross-culturally or cross geographies, trying to get everybody on the same page, everybody saying we've all got one definition of success, can be challenging. But it's fundamental. If you don't start off on the same page, it's unlikely you're going to finish on the same page. So having that understanding, being able to look through the stakeholder lens, particularly if you're presenting and pitching to customers, you need to understand what success looks like for them, because it will invariably look slightly different to your definition of success. A lot of people find that without tying down those parameters, it's very easy to find that you can start working on a plan and then there's a massive creep in scope. Plans suddenly get bigger and bigger and the parameters become very elastic, and you start getting muddled up with the data because you're trying to please everybody, trying to incorporate everything, and you end up boiling the ocean full of data, and it's very difficult to distill that down into a plan. As I've said before, we find that some people start with a solution and then try and manipulate the data to support a predetermined solution. And then what I find, and I have to coach clients with quite a lot, is because they're so close to their business, because they're working in a continuum process, it's sometimes difficult to see the difference between goals and strategies. So they'll say our goal is to launch product X in the next 6 months. And it's like, is that your goal or is that your strategy? You've already decided that's what you're going to do. And then this is maybe a more tactical execution plan of doing that. Do you know it's the right thing to do for the right reasons? If you stand back and say, well, what does success look like? What are you trying to achieve? Is that actually the right thing to do? And it's sometimes we need to be quite provocative in challenging people with what they think is a goal and what we might say that looks like a predetermined strategy. If you stand back and put that into goal language, it might look slightly different, and that's people sometimes find it difficult to differentiate between the two things. So being clear about the parameters of any strategic plan is important. So what are you looking at? What's the scope of what you're looking at? What's the time frame? So I've had people call me in and say, okay, we've got this 2-year plan, and then other people say, yeah, but we've spent 6 months talking about it, we spent 6 months collecting the data, so is it really a 2-year plan, or actually have we got to deliver it now in 18 months? Somebody has to make a decision. All the key stakeholders need to agree on, what is that time frame? What's in, what's out in terms of channels or customers or categories. There's lots of different parameters and ways to cut and decide what's the data that you need to look at and what's the data that you can put to one side, because it's just noise. It's not actually helpful. It's just creating a lot of background noise. And then we need to have that clear understanding of what success looks like. Wonderful quote that's been attributed to various people over the years, but essentially it's the quote that's important. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Again, I refer to the UK's embarrassing execution of Brexit. We didn't know what good looked like. Nobody sold one cohesive idea of success. So we couldn't create a proper plan. So the start point is really important for setting the direction. And I've worked with companies that do a lot of Lean Six Sigma type of problem analysis, and there's some fantastic problem solving tools. But if that analysis isn't anchored on, well, what does success look like? How do you know what is the right solution to all that analytical understanding of the problem? How do you know where the priorities, the level of investment required, if you aren't anchored around a common agreement to where you're trying to get to? So our aims, we call it the aim. Our aims are the end goals, and what's important, it's the destination, not the journey. It's where we want to get to, not how we're going to get there. So I've got some examples here of aims. So if we were to say the aim was to set up a new sales team, do we think that's a good aim? To be the number one, is that a goal? Is that ambitious? Is that what the end point? To be the market leader by volume and value in 2022. These are three different ways of articulating different goals. Any thoughts on which one of those three is the best articulation of an aim? Anybody going to volunteer an opinion? Okay, so the first one, to set up a new sales team, that's a strategy, that's or a tactic, it's an action. So that's not really an end point, it's an action. To be number one, great ambition, yes, it's a goal, but at this point it's too vague for people to go, okay, well, we all have the same. A lot of companies use the word, we want to be successful. Well, what does success mean? How do you know when you've achieved success? So being too vague is one of the traps that people can fall into. So to be the market leader in volume and value by this time frame is starting to get a lot clearer in what success looks like. So particularly if you've got a statement of what success should be, it's worth trying to work out, has everybody got the same picture of that success? Can we understand the criteria, both soft and hard criteria of what success looks like? So do we have any boxes to tick that tells us? So I had one client that wanted blue sky leadership between them and the competition. That sounds great, sounds quite sexy, but what does blue sky leadership look like? So people had to start to say about, well, how could we quantify the gap between us and the number two in the marketplace to know what's blue sky and what is just continued being number one? So you need to ask questions so that everybody's clear on the same definitions of success. If I asked you all now to close your eyes and think of a dog, we've got 13, 14 people in the room, and if I went around the room and asked you what that dog was, we'd probably have at least 5 or 6 different dogs that people would describe. So we definitely have a few Labradors, but there might be a few cockapoos. There'd definitely be a few terriers in the room. They've all got 4 legs, 2 ears, waggy tail, but they're different because we haven't bottomed out what our combined definition or favorite dog would be. Sometimes we have to then, well, very often we need to quantify success. We talk about preset objectives. So there's no point making up targets until we've done the analysis if those targets haven't already been set. If they've been set, if somebody said, go away and create a strategy to deliver an extra 5% margin, well, that's a preset objective. We've got to work to that, and we've got to understand what are the barriers to hitting that 5%. If somebody says go away and create a growth plan, and the data tells us actually all these indicators, all these barriers and opportunities show that if we did X, Y, and Z, we deliver 4.5% or 5.6%, you've quantified, you've sized the prize out of the analysis, and that analysis has created a meaningful number. We find a lot of people will spend so much time up front, finger in the air, trying to quantify success, but that number doesn't mean anything until you've done the analysis. So we would recommend that you put markers in. Your markers be, we want growth in market share, we want growth in net margin, we want growth in shareholder value, we want growth in brand awareness. Any of the KPIs that you want to be measured against, we can put markers down, but the numbers of what your plan's going to achieve will come out of doing the analysis, creating the recommendations, working through the costs and the benefits of those recommendations, and you'll come out with something at the other end that you can then go back and put in against those markers. So an example here of one of the case studies that we use, it's a chocolate company. It's just a plan specifically for one of the 3 divisions that they work in. And it's a 3-year strategic plan to be the brand leader by volume in that channel and to increase their margin. But it's got some quantifiable targets there that says, what is the profit that we've got to deliver? What's the volume we need to deliver and the growth in that volume? And what's the improvement in share position? So we've broken down the start point into elements that say we've now got the key bits of information to put into our strategy sat nav to then go away and create a plan to deliver. Are there any questions at this point?
We have one question from Leah Boone.
Okay.
Who should best use this?
Who should best use this? Great question. We train a lot of different functions and levels in organizations. The leadership team need to have a plan to set the direction. So leadership teams, this is great for creating overall business strategy. It's a way of bringing it's a way, particularly when you've got to bring different functions together. So logistics, supply chain, finance, marketing, sales. It's a way of creating a cross-functional leadership plan. However, on a day-to-day level, we have lots of middle managers that are creating brand plans, supply chain plans, functional plans or customer plans that they're using this methodology with. So it works at different levels. You just have different, your entity is different. You've either got a total company entity and scope that you're looking at, or you've got a very specific functional customer product entity that you would apply this to. Does that help? Unless you've got another question, I'll assume that answered that. So just moving on, in terms of the analysis, this is where people really can get lost in the data. So we find that people end up just doing this show and tell of lots and lots of data, which is fantastic. It demonstrates how hard people have worked. If people have spent weeks and pulling together data and looking at data and have been in meetings, they want to show that. So there's a tendency to go volume over, so quantity over quality sometimes in terms of showing all the work, showing all the data, and not being comfortable, not appreciating. Actually, there's a real skill in distilling all that data down into something that is really, really simple and short. You can tell a really key strategic story in 20 slides. It doesn't have to be 100 slides, but it's easier to do 100 slides than it is to distill that down into the story of 15 or 20. There's a real skill in that simplification and making the complex simple. And that's where SCQuARE can really help give you a structure to really aggregate the thinking up and create a really strong story summary of all that hard work and analysis. What a lot of people also struggle with, they're comfortable manipulating the data, they're less comfortable turning that data into an insight. And then it's hard, without that insight, it's hard then to drive action out of that analysis. And when you present that, you're presenting all this information together, then it's sometimes often a struggle for the audience to go, where's that taking me? What's that telling me? What have I got to remember? What is it? What are the messages that I've got from that 50, 60 page presentation? So it's not memorable, and people lose track of what are the key messages. So it can be hard to land the insights if you're just throwing too much data at people. So the big principle in SCQuARE, and this is the bit that is different probably to anything else people have done in the past, and how they receive the data and what they do with the data, our founding principle is that we have to separate the data and structure the data in such a way that we can have clarity and isolate the problems and isolate what is background contextual information and bring forward what is it that needs fixing, needs addressing, needs a plan. So we have to separate the data in order to interpret it. And if you don't interpret the data, your presentation is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. So we need to separate and organize the data, and that's what the S and C of SCQuARE is all about. So the S is about what is the positive information, what is the positive background context that allows us to paint the backdrop and get everybody on the same page. Everybody has a common understanding of where we're at. So we've got the context, and then that context is setting up, okay, the duff. However, what's going to stop us from achieving success? What are the barriers? What are the things that are going to make it difficult for us to achieve our goals? And we need to call them out. We need to see, I know we've got a picture of giraffes here, but actually we need to call out the elephant in the room. And we need to isolate, well, what are the opportunities? What are positive changes that we need a plan for? It's no good doing a SWOT analysis and putting something down that the competitions have got a weakness because their warehouse has burnt down or their technology has fallen over. We need to have a plan of action in order to exploit that opportunity. So the C bucket of information is all about isolating the problems and identifying opportunities that require an action plan. And in isolating that data, it's much easier then to ask the question, so what? What does this mean? It's very difficult to interpret information that is both good and bad news, because what's your message? What's your so what? This is working, but this is a weakness. This is where we've had a strong performance, but this is where we've had a poor performance. Well, what's your headline? What's your so what? It's very difficult to land a message when those messages are mixed. So separating the data allows you to have clear so what interpretation and create an insight. So in our S, we've got the positive or worst case neutral context. So what's working, what are we good at, what can we build on? And then importantly, what's going to drive the action is what do we need to fix? What's gone wrong? What hasn't worked as planned? What are things that are coming around the corner that's actually bad news for us and we need an action plan or response for? So we need to make sure that we isolate this information because it will drive the action, drive the strategy. But there's also positive changes that we might need to exploit. So, it could be something our competition's doing, it could be technology that's going to make a massive positive difference, but we need to make sure we've got the investment, we need to have a plan to embrace it. So again, action is required. The way that you interpret information will depend on the lens that you are looking through. So you could look at the same piece of information, but look at it through different lenses and the interpretation changes. So we have a fact here, in 10 years' time, a third of the population will be over 70, and at the moment it's less than a third. What's the implication if you're looking at that through the lens of the government? A minute to think about that. So obviously there's going to be increased costs, there's going to be less tax revenue coming in. So that's a major hassle, major problem that requires a financial solution in order to address that problem. If we look at that same fact, but we change the entity and we now say we're a manufacturer of Zimmer frames, same fact, but completely different so what? So huge market expansion, huge opportunity for increased volume, but with that, it's also an attractive market for new competition. You need to look at, well, have we got the capacity to realise that opportunity? So completely different so what's, because we've looked at this fact through different lenses. So if you're looking at creating a plan, a strategy for a customer, if you look at it through their eyes, the interpretation will be different if you look at it from your own agenda. And this can work across different functions. And having that ability to go, what's the so what of this information for finance, the supply chain, marketing, sales, allows you to have really solid thinking. You're not just taking data at face value, you're interrogating that data and driving meaning and insights from just asking that so what question through the entity, through the eyes of the entity and their aim. So Melvin and Agatha, do you think it's worth us trying to do the break idea or just plough on through some of the thinking? Because obviously, I'm not sure if people are up for going into
it. Yeah, we are coming to a close soon. So
okay.
I think maybe you should.
I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through this then. If you've got a problem then, so if you've identified your problems, you've got two choices. You either fix the cause of it, and if you can't change the cause of the problem, then you have to find a way of avoiding the negative consequences. And this is where the gold dust and the magic of SCQuARE happens. We have something called the causal chain, where you take your issue, your problem, and you say, what are the consequences of doing nothing? This is how you create a call to action, because when you put plans and proposals together, very often, if it's not been put together in a way that's really compelling, it's very easy for somebody to say, well, we don't want to spend that money, we don't want to create that change, let's see what happens, let's sit tight for a while, let's do nothing. If you know that the problem is really big and it means that you'll fail to achieve your goals, then you need to spell out for people the consequences of doing nothing. But in order to do something, you need to understand the causes, because you've either got to fix the cause, or if you can't fix the cause, you've got to find a way of minimizing these consequences. So causal chains take you through a way of thinking that allows you to map out and unpick the complexity of a problem. And this is where, and I swear after 15 years of training SCQuARE, this is where the magic happens, because you can bring together all the different perspectives and expertise across the business and create one picture and create massive alignment. If you've got cross-functional conflict potentially, this is where you can get everybody on the same page, because they can all have a voice, but that voice comes together and says, right, with this combined expertise in the room, what do we think the solutions are? You can find fixable causes, which will drive your options and solutions. And you can rule out options that might sound good, but actually don't help you achieve your aim. And you can get agreement on what the solutions are. When you look across multiple issues, different issues that you've isolated, you can start to see hidden common causes that hadn't been appreciated until you've got this perspective, and then you can create the right solutions that kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to whiz through this example here. In fact, I'm going to not use that example because we're running short on time. So the causal chains really help you unpick the problem, take something that's potentially quite complex and unravel that complexity and have an understanding of really what it is you need to address, need to fix, and where the solution is going to come from. So causal chains, some real magical quality thinking that goes in here that allows you to create the argumentation when you come to do your presentation. All this thinking, if you've covered a lot of ground, a lot of detailed analysis, we need to be able to bring it together on one page. This is our elevator pitch for the problem. And what we want to do is be able to synthesize all our analysis onto one page that brings together all that understanding, but also has a strong indication of what it is you need to do, what the strategy is going to be, that the direction that your plan's going to go into. So your pivotal question brings that problem together and directs you towards the answer. It has something called the main action, which puts an umbrella strategic direction into the question. So we have this template. How can we do something to overcome the challenges that we've isolated and exploits the opportunity that we've also uncovered in order to achieve our aims? So I was going to take you through the gin example. I'm just going to whiz ahead to the question. If we have something like, sorry, just go back one. How can we unlock brand potential? We would call this motherhood and apple pie, because unlock brand potential is just a restatement of the aims. How can we unlock brand potential in order to unlock the brand's latent potential? We're just putting our aim into our question and think that's a strategic action. That's not what we want. How can we grow sales? That's too generic. What we want to do is demonstrate the thinking that's come out of our causal chains, where we've addressed the causes of the problem, the solutions that we could come up with, and we want to include that. How can we reposition Brand X as aspirational, differentiated and accessible to 24-year-old plus drinkers to overcome the lack of front of mind awareness, increasing threat of wine, price differential versus own label, ready to drink perceptions and accessibility of wine, and exploit broad consumer footprint, latent style and sophistication, growth in cocktails, and then deliver our net sales ambitions, unlocking the brand potential and lead the category back into long-term profitable growth. This is an example of what a question might look like. It's a summary of the analysis on one page, and it has a very strong indication of where the solution is going to come from. And then the final piece of the jigsaw is, how do we present that thinking in a way that is compelling? Because it's not enough to be right. Being logical does not make you persuasive. You have got to persuade other people that your thinking is right. So if people don't buy the problem, they won't buy the solution. You must create the pain. You must sell the problem. People's ability to buy the problem will be affected by lots of different things. The baggage that they bring into the room, how much time they've got to focus on what you're telling them, whether they can actually remember what you've told them. People remember a lot less than you probably think they do. So how do you make it punchy? What are the things that you need to land that they walk away and understand? And you need to think about how they actually understood it. How can you help them assimilate what they're seeing? So SCQuARE is also the structure of the story that helps you pull that thinking together in a way that is logical. Once upon a time, there was a gin brand, and ends up with a solution of how you're going to turn around and achieve the goals for that gin brand. SCQuARE, as I said, really is a software that steps you through this process, asks you all the questions, asks you to put the information, structure your information, asks you to come up with a so what, and then helps you deliver your presentation. The so whats go on to become the headlines in your presentation. So getting that interpretation of during your analysis is key to creating a really powerful story. Having strong headlines helps your audience assimilate your thinking, that you tell them what they need to understand. They're not doing any work when they're listening to you. They're just listening, understanding, and hopefully agreeing with your thinking. So pivotal question is partially automated. You've just got to summarize that main action that's come out of your causal chain thinking. So the software does so much of the work for you and helps you deliver a very solid execution of the SCQuARE process. So just conscious of time, this has been a whistle-stop tour through the SCQuARE framework, the SCQuARE mnemonic and methodology. Thank you for listening to me. I hope it's been interesting. If you've got any questions you want to take offline, there's an offer that we're happy to share with you people today that says we have open programs which we obviously can deliver virtually through what we've had to do over the last 15 months. We have a Singapore time frame open program running in September. We've got 2 programs, and for the people here today, we have got a buy one place get one place free. So if you're interested in attending a course, it's 2 lots of 4 hours over 2 days, and you could go through what I've just taken you through in 50 minutes. You can go through that at a much more steady pace. Any questions, any thoughts, any feedback, I'd love to hear. And thank you for the opportunity to share SCQuARE with you all.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for the wonderful presentation. So there you go. Sorry for underrunning a bit, but we all hope that was very useful for everyone. And with that in mind, we're coming to the end of this session. If anyone from the audience likes to have a copy of the slides that Tracy presented, let us know and we'll be happy to send it over to you. We would love to receive feedback from you, so flash right in front of your screen is a QR code of the feedback form. The link is also sent into the chat box, so head right on and tell us what you feel about today's session and how we can improve in our next events. Again, 2 options for you all. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the direct link in the chat box. While you're doing that, let me take this moment to thank firstly our expert for today, Tracy Rose, for the wonderful session. It's really useful and timely. Next, the People team for bringing this event into reality. And of course, the warmest thank you for all the audience we have for participating and making this discussion engaging. If you find this session useful for you, we highly encourage you to check the remaining sessions that we have for the month of August. So this has been Agatha from People, but I won't be saying goodbye for now. We'll see you all again at the next session. Again, thank you and enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.